Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to try to unpack this whole U.S. military intervention in Mexico thing, to combat drug cartels. You guys have been sending in tons of articles and research on this, which, makes sense. It's all over the news and everyone's talking about it.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a topic that brings up a lot of questions and worries, and, for good reason. So I think we really need to take a deep dive into this, look at the history and what this would all even mean legally, what are the risks? And of course, we can't forget about the human cost of something this drastic.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. From what I've been reading, this isn't just some hypothetical anymore. It seems like Trump is actually seriously considering taking military action, like on his own, against the cartels. Remember all that stuff he was saying about shooting missiles into Mexico to, blow up drug labs?
Oh, yeah, right. Back then, we all just thought that was, Trump just saying stuff like he does. But turns out they were actually talking about that in the Oval Office, like for real, during his first term. And if you believe what former Defense Secretary Mark Esper says, Trump even asked if the U.S. could make it look like it was some other country that did it.
Seriously?
Hey!
That's really disturbing. And now it seems like it's not just Trump anymore. Pretty much every single Republican candidate in the 2024 election was saying we should send troops into Mexico. Like, it's basically official Republican policy now.
It's not even just campaign talk either. Republican lawmakers are actually working on bills that would let them use the military against cartels, and they want to label them as, terrorists. This is getting real and fast.
It's kind of scary how this went from a crazy idea to, what Republicans actually want to do. But is it even legal? Sending troops into another country without their permission, that's got to be against international law, right?
Yeah, totally. International law is pretty clear about that. You can't just, invade another country. Obviously, there are some exceptions, like if the UN Security Council says it's okay or if it's self-defense. But that doesn't seem to apply here, does it?
Some people are saying the U.S. could do it if Mexico can't or won't stop the cartels from being a threat. They're really pushing that line, aren't they?
That's the argument they're using. They're saying cartels are a national security risk to the U.S. because of all the fentanyl. And some people are even going so far as to call fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction.
Okay, that's some serious legal stuff, and I'm sure people will be debating it for a while. But how is Mexico reacting to all this? I can't imagine they're thrilled.
Yeah, you think. President Sheinbaum has straight up said no to any help from the U.S., and they've even stopped sharing intelligence with us. Mexico has a long and kind of messed up history with U.S. intervention. They've been invaded multiple times and lost half their country to us. So they're pretty suspicious of anything that looks like we're trying to meddle.
I get it. It must be incredibly frustrating for them. It's like we don't even respect their sovereignty.
Exactly. Mexico's government is really protective of their independence. They see this whole thing as the U.S. trying to take control. This could totally wreck the relationship between the U.S. and Mexico.
And we're talking about our biggest trading partner here.
Yeah.
And they're essential for dealing with migration. If this blows up, it could completely destroy all that. Talk about a gamble.
And the big question is, even if we forget about all the legal and diplomatic stuff, will this even work? Is sending the military in really gonna fix the drug problem?
It feels like we've tried this before, hasn't it? That whole kingpin strategy thing where we targeted cartel leaders?
Yeah, we did. And if history tells us anything, it's that taking down leaders rarely actually stops the drug trade. Even if we could somehow get rid of all the top guys and destroy every lab, the drugs would still keep flowing. New cartels would just pop up and probably be even more violent because they'd be fighting for control.
So it's like a game of whack-a-mole. You get rid of one and two more appear.
Exactly. It's treating the symptom and not the cause.
And let's not forget all the damage this could do in both Mexico and the U.S.
Oh, absolutely. We could end up with tons of civilian casualties, people forced from their homes, infrastructure destroyed, and Mexico becoming even more unstable. It could actually make things even worse.
Like trying to put out a fire with gasoline.
A super dangerous and unpredictable fire. And we haven't even talked about what this would do to the U.S.-Mexico relationship, or the possibility of the cartels hitting back, or how much this whole intervention would even cost.
Okay, so sending troops into Mexico, probably a bad idea. But we can't just ignore this, right? The drug trade is destroying lives in Mexico, here in the U.S., everywhere.
Absolutely, yeah. That's why we got to look at other solutions. And the good news is there are a lot of experts who've been studying this for a long time, and they have some really interesting ideas.
Okay, so what are they saying?
Well, most people agree that we need a plan that attacks this from all sides. We got to reduce demand here in the U.S., mess up the global supply chain, and deal with the stuff that lets these cartels get so powerful in the first place.
Okay, so it's like a much bigger picture approach than just trying to blow stuff up. That makes sense. But what does tackling demand in the U.S. even mean?
It means admitting that the U.S. has a serious drug problem. If we want to stop the supply, we got to reduce the demand, and that means getting real about drug prevention and treatment programs.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard that before. Why haven't we gotten better at this?
Honestly, it's complicated. There's still a lot of shame around addiction, so people don't ask for help. There's not enough money or political will to fund these programs. And then there's the pharmaceutical industry. They kind of helped create the opioid crisis.
Oh, for sure. I remember reading about how some of those companies were pushing painkillers like crazy, and they totally downplayed how addictive they were. It's nuts that they got away with that for so long.
Totally. They have to take some responsibility for what's going on. That's why a lot of experts are saying we need stricter rules for prescribing opioids, more transparency about the risks, and maybe even lawsuits against the companies that lied about their drugs.
I'm all for holding them accountable. Sounds like there's a lot we can do here in the U.S. to, deal with the demand side. But what about the rest of the world? We talked about Mexico, but isn't China a big part of this too?
You're right. We can't just focus on Mexico. China makes a lot of the chemicals used to make fentanyl, and fentanyl is the deadliest drug in the U.S. right now. So we have to pressure them to stop making those chemicals.
You're talking about those fentanyl precursors, right? The ingredients for fentanyl. Sounds like we need to work with China on this instead of just blaming them.
Exactly. Diplomacy, not military action.
Hmm,
And that goes for Mexico, too. We need to build trust and work together, not make threats and send in troops.
that makes sense. But being realistic, diplomacy takes time. And Trump isn't exactly known for being patient, right? Can he even do that?
That's a good point, given what we've seen from him in the past. But there are people in the government and in other countries who believe in diplomacy and finding peaceful solutions. They may not be as loud as Trump, but they're doing important work.
Okay, so we've got demand reduction and global cooperation. But what about that stuff you mentioned earlier about what's going on in Mexico itself? Why are these cartels so strong there?
That's where things get even more complicated. You're talking about poverty, lack of opportunity, corruption in the government. All those things make it really easy for the cartels to recruit people and stay in control.
So it's not just about the police and the military. It's about fixing these bigger problems that allow these criminal organizations to thrive.
Right. We need to invest in Mexico's economy, promote good government, and strengthen civil society. It's a long-term solution, definitely, but it's the only way to really stop the violence and corruption.
Sounds good, but how likely are we to actually make progress on these issues? As they seem pretty deeply rooted.
You're not wrong. It's a huge challenge. It's like trying to untangle a giant, messy knot. But there are things we can do, and that's where you come in as an informed and engaged citizen.
Wait, you're saying our listeners can actually do something about this?
Absolutely. It all starts with learning. Stay informed about the issue, understand the different sides, and learn about the solutions people are proposing. Read articles, listen to podcasts like this one.
Okay, I see what you did there.
But seriously, informed citizens are the best defense against bad policies. Once you've educated yourself, use your voice.
I think a lot of people feel like their voice doesn't matter, like they're just one person.
That's just not true. Never underestimate what one voice can do, especially when it joins with others. Contact your representatives, let them know what you think. They need to hear from us, especially on something as important as this.
So call them, email them, send a smoke signal, whatever it takes to get their attention.
Exactly. And don't forget about working together. There are tons of organizations that are fighting for peace, diplomacy, and human rights in the U.S. and Mexico. Support them, donate, volunteer, spread the word.
They're doing amazing work on the ground, trying to bring people together and find alternatives to war. They need us now more than ever.
And don't forget about social media. It can be a really powerful tool to raise awareness and get people moving.
Share articles. Talk about it with people. Push back against fake news. Use your platform to amplify the voices of the people most affected by this sound. Mexicans, people living on the border, people struggling with addiction.
Every post, every share, every conversation can help change how people see this issue. And if you want to do even more, get involved in your community.
Organize a protest, write to your local newspaper, go to town hall meetings, make your voice heard, show the politicians and everyone else that this is important.
Because it is. The stakes are huge. We're talking about the possibility of war, of people suffering, of our democracy being weakened.
This isn't just some theoretical discussion. This is about real people's lives. We can't just sit here and do nothing.
So I want this to be a wake-up call. Learn about this issue. Speak up. Get involved.
Don't let fear or apathy stop you. Turn your anger, your worry, your passion into something good.
Because if we work together, we can make a difference. We can stop this insane idea and push for something better, something that actually works.
Okay, you've convinced me. I'm ready to fight.
Ah.
But before we get too excited about all the ways we can take action, I think we need to come back to something we talked about earlier, all the damage this could cause. We can't just sweep that under the rug.
You're absolutely right. We have to be honest about the potential consequences, and the truth is they are really serious and could affect a lot of people.
So let's talk about that. What kind of damage are we talking about?
Well, the biggest thing is the relationship between the U.S. and Mexico. It could be totally destroyed. This is our biggest trading partner, a key ally in dealing with migration, and a country that has a long and complex history with the U.S.
We've already seen how tense things have gotten just from talking about military intervention. If Trump actually does this, it could completely wipe out any trust or cooperation between our countries.
It's a huge risk, and both countries could pay the price. And then there's the human cost. Military action always leads to innocent people being killed and displaced. We've seen it happen over and over again.
It's horrible to think about innocent people getting caught in the crossfire. What about the impact on Mexico as a whole?
It could make the country even more unstable, lead to more violence, and actually make the cartels stronger. It's like we're trying to put out a fire with gasoline. It will backfire and make things worse.
So the potential for damage is huge, and it's not just limited to Mexico.
Right, you got it. The U.S. could be affected too. For one thing, it could lead to a flood of refugees coming to the U.S., which is exactly what Trump says he wants to stop.
Pretty ironic, right?
Totally. Shows how short-sighted this whole plan is. And then there's the chance that the cartels will retaliate.
You mean fight back? Yeah, exactly. They're not just going to let the U.S. military come in and do whatever they want.
It's definitely a possibility. We could see attacks in the U.S., more violence along the border, and the cartels becoming even bolder and more dangerous. It's a gamble that could easily blow up in our faces.
It sounds like we could end up with a chain reaction of bad consequences that just spiral out of control. The potential for damage is truly catastrophic for both Mexico and the U.S.
Exactly. And that's why we have to try everything else before even thinking about military intervention. It should be the absolute last resort, not the first thing we jump to.
We need to make sure everyone understands that. We can't let Trump rush into this without understanding what could happen.
I agree. We need to focus on diplomacy, cooperation, and a plan that addresses the root causes of this problem. Military intervention is dangerous and won't work. It will only make things worse.
Okay, so we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into this whole U.S. Mexico military intervention thing. We've talked about Trump wanting to send in their troops, the legal and diplomatic mess that would create, and just how bad the fallout could be. But now I want to get to what our listeners can actually do about it. It's easy to feel kind of helpless when you're talking about something this big, you know?
Yeah, I get that. But I really believe that knowing what's going on is the first step to having power. And that means giving you, our listeners, the information you need to actually do something.
So let's get practical. What can people actually do to make a difference here?
The most important thing is to not let this just become background noise. It's easy to get overwhelmed by the news and all the crazy stuff happening, but what's at stake here is too important to ignore.
Yeah, like that saying, all it takes for evil to win is for good people to do nothing.
Exactly. So, step one, stay informed. Don't just get your news from headlines and social media. Read in-depth articles from sources you trust. Listen to podcasts like this one that really dig into the details.
Okay, I see what you're doing there, slipping in another plug for the show.
But seriously, informed citizens are the best way to stop bad policies. Once you know what's going on, it's time to speak up.
I think a lot of people feel like their voice doesn't matter, like they're just one person.
That's just not true. One voice can make a difference, especially when it joins with others. Call your elected officials, write to them, let them know where you stand on this. They need to hear from us, especially on something this important.
So make some noise, get their attention, however you got to do it.
And remember, there's power in numbers. There are so many organizations working for peace, diplomacy, and human rights in both the U.S. and Mexico. Support them, donate if you can, volunteer your time, tell people about what they're doing.
Those groups are the ones doing the hard work on the ground, trying to find peaceful solutions. They need our support now more than ever.
And hey, social media isn't all bad. It can be a really powerful way to raise awareness and get people involved.
Share articles, start conversations, call out fake news. Use your platform to boost the voices of the people who are most affected by this. People in Mexico, people living on the border, people struggling with addiction.
Every time you post, every time you share, every conversation you have can help change the narrative. And if you're ready to go even further, get active in your community.
Organize a protest, write a letter to your local newspaper, go to those town hall meetings. Show up, make your presence known, and let your elected officials see that people care about this.
Because they should. The stakes are incredibly high. We're talking about war, about human suffering, about our democracy being at risk.
This isn't just some theoretical discussion in a classroom. This is about real people's lives. We can't just sit back and do nothing.
So I want you to see this as a wake-up call. Learn about this. Speak up. Get involved.
Don't let fear or apathy hold you back. Use your anger, your worry, your passion to do something good.
We can make a difference if we work together. We can stop this crazy plan and push for a better way, a way that actually has a chance of working.
Well, you've definitely given us a lot to think about, and hopefully a lot to do, too. This is way more complicated than it seems at first glance.
It is. And it needs a smart and informed response, one that puts human rights and international law first, and aims for peace and stability in the long run.
Sounds like we've got our work cut out for us. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We hope this has been informative and has given you some ideas about what you can do.
This isn't the end of the conversation, it's just the beginning. Now it's up to you to take what you've learned and do something with it. So until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep fighting for a better world.